My name is Robert Goodman, and I received a heart transplant at the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania in November of 2013. I am 67 years old, and the type of cancer I experienced since my organ transplant was a melanoma that was found on my stomach during one of my annual visits to the dermatologist as part of the protocol for follow-up. He immediately took a sample and sent it for biopsy and called me 2 days later to tell me that indeed it was a malignant melanoma, and within 3 or 4 days, because there was a weekend in between, I was called by the dermatological surgeon's office to schedule my appointment to come in for the surgery to have it excised. That took place about a week and a half or so later, and that went very smoothly. I was very pleased with how I was treated. Wonderful people. And about 10 days later, after a little prompting from me, I got a phone call to tell me that all the margins were clear and I didn't have anything to worry about, and that the tumor had been, or the cancer had been taken care of as a result of the excision. I subsequently had received the pathology reports and the biopsy reports and shared them with a friend of mine who was a retired hematologist oncologist to just get his opinion as well, and he told me exactly the same thing. And so it was a fairly short period of time, a little nerve-wracking at times during that period, and needless to say, I'm very happy with the result. And I know that it's a fact of life that those of us who have had transplants and are on anti-rejection drugs, it's a fact of life, is something that we have to live with. Some of us are luckier at it than others, and so far so good for me. I was diagnosed, again, it was during a routine surveillance, if you will, or surveillance visit, and it was about 2 months after 5 years of my heart transplant.
How often do you see your dermatologist?
Well, I think for the next year I'm going to see him every 3 months, which I think is clearly a wise thing to do. And after that, it may go back to annually. It will obviously depend, because he's clearly sensitized to my condition or my situation, as well he should be. And I'm grateful that he found what he did and identified it so quickly.
And so your transplant program was vigilant in making sure you did this preemptive testing up front?
Oh, the transplant program said every year you're going to see the dermatologist.
Okay.
And they just made it very clear early on that this is something that just needed to be done. And I try and be as reasonably compliant as I possibly can with taking all of my medications and exercise and everything else. And this is just a part of it. And it's typically a pretty easy visit, and it's generally pretty conversational. This last one, not so much.
What was your first reaction when you heard the word cancer and melanoma?
I will admit to being a little bit freaked out by it, and said to myself, ultimately, if it is cancer, so I have cancer. That notion was a little foreign to me, but I accepted it pretty quickly. And I think more importantly was, in some respects, what did I think about, not so much the notion of having cancer, but what were the next steps? What was to happen next? And it was surgery followed by, obviously, the pathology report to find out whether there was something that needed to be done further, or was it something I didn't, that we didn't really, other than surveillance, that we didn't need to deal with. And I had absolutely prepared myself for a potential fight, and if I needed to have chemotherapy and I needed to have radiation therapy, if it had spread, I was absolutely ready to do that. And worst case, I would have lost my hair, but, that's obviously not much of an issue anyway.
What lessons did you learn from this life experience?
That I need to be a little bit more diligent for myself in terms of identifying things that I think I didn't notice before, or I find unusual, and I need to be a little more diligent in terms of being out in the sun, and that I have a great team of people here at the Hospital University of Pennsylvania that stand behind me when there is a crisis.
So what message would you give other transplant patients in terms of if they ever have to deal with this or their own surveillance?
Well, I think from a surveillance standpoint, I think they need to be very diligent themselves, not only to look at things themselves and maybe their caregiver or spouse to also see things, because you can't always see things yourself, given where they may or may not be on your body. And the other piece is that you need to absolutely go to see your dermatologist at least once a year. Ideally, someone who understands what could happen because of the sensitivity you have in terms of the medication you take. So I would say you need to remain diligent. It's a small price to pay for having a second lease on life.